Welcome to Human Risk, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of human behaviour as a risk. Here's your host, Christian Hunt.
Hello and welcome back to the Human Risk podcast. On this episode, I'm speaking to the author of a brand new book that explores the human dynamics of the workplace. Carina Maggar is a creative copywriter. Don't worry if you're not entirely sure what a copywriter does, we cover that in our discussion. She has worked with a number of leading brands, including Pepsi, Levis, YouTube and Nintendo. As a student, Carina did a variety of jobs, and while doing them, she paid close attention to all the things she found interesting. Things that stood out for some reason or another, and she took notes. Those notes and some interviews she did with some other creative thought leaders form the basis for her new book, How to Make Work Not Suck, Honest Advice for People with Jobs. It's a collection of 120 irreverent, unusual, straight-talking insights about the world of work. Now, when I tell you they're things like dream big, plan small, and no one knows what they're doing, neither should you, you might think they're statements of the obvious or throwaway comments. But it's the simplicity and the context in which the book places them, particularly the stunning illustrations that accompany them, that makes them so powerful. As you'll hear from Carina, communicating things in a simple way is what copywriters are good at, and in this book, she demonstrates that skill. What fascinates me about the dynamics that Carina highlights is that many of them are examples where conventional wisdom, the kind of careers or work advice you could well have got from your parents, might not actually be quite as wise as it seems in the modern world. As we explore in our discussion, experience in an analog world might not be as relevant in a digital one. Equally, things we've learnt during COVID might render certain pieces of advice that made sense pre-COVID less relevant. That means that many of the pieces of advice Carina provides in her book might seem counterintuitive, or rather, they're unconventional. But when you think about them, they are actually intuitive. In a rapidly changing world, where technology, social trends and factors like the climate crisis are driving a requirement to think differently, challenging how we do things is more important than ever before, and falling back into the rut of that's the way we've always done things can induce human risk. That's why I love hearing from unconventional thinkers on the show who could help us to develop new solutions to the challenges we face. As you'll hear, Carina provides a refreshing perspective on work and workplace behaviours. So as we contemplate questions like, should we be forcing people back to the office? What does work really mean in the modern world? And what do I want to get out of my career? Her perspectives are fascinating. And if, like me, you've been around for a while, it's good to have your preconceptions challenged from time to time. So please enjoy my discussion with Carina Maggar on how to make work not suck.
Carina, welcome to the Human Risk podcast.
Thank you. Hello. Welcome to talking to me.
Before I do that act of talking to you, or hopefully with you, can you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself? Because I think you've got a fascinating story.
Oh gosh, I always find this such an intimidating question because really I could go on for hours. I'm a copywriter. I studied advertising at uni. I had a brief stint of being a TV presenter for a while. I occasionally did voiceovers. That's when I realized I didn't really know what I was doing with my life. I wasn't really enjoying it. So I went back to uni to study psychotherapy. And I was on that course for a year, so I completed my higher education certificate in it. But I chose not to continue for lots of reasons. My head wasn't really in it. And then I returned to advertising again as a copywriter. And I've just released my first book. So I guess I'm an author now. I'm a bit of a mess, to be honest.
I'm going to ask you what I think will seem like a really dumb question from your side, but I have an idea of what copywriter does, but I think it's relevant to the book. What does that actually involve?
So I specialize in something called the tone of voice of a brand. So it's how a brand conveys its personality. Every brand has a personality, and it's very important because what you'll find as a consumer is that most of the time you're buying into the brand's personality rather than the product itself. Like a really good example is, people tend to be either Team Nike or Team Adidas. And the thing that will make you a Team Adidas over a Team Nike is probably that you resonate with its personality. So I write for brands, whether it's a script for a radio or a script for the TV or the copy, words is copy. That's what it's called. The copy on the side of a carton of juice. I love words. That's what a copywriter does.
And so you're the voice that you're becoming for a particular exercise, you are the voice of the brand. You write the thing that the actor would say, or and therefore you're speaking on its behalf.
Totally, yeah. But I'm a big, copywriters are a big part in selling a dream, basically. Why are you choosing Colgate over Sensodyne? It's because of the advert. They're selling the same thing at the end of the day. So a copywriter, I suppose, has quite a large role on the creative sort of team within an agency. Usually you work in a partnership alongside an art director.
And so they come and tell you, so this is going on the side of X, or this is going on a radio ad, and we want to say the following. And you're responsible for then magicking the words to get that message across.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of my job is spent reading and researching. You can't really become the thing unless you have learned absolutely everything about it and spoken to all the people that buy it. A lot of research is involved in being a copywriter. I mean, lots of people say 95% is research, the 5% is the writing. So, it works perfectly for me. For, a lot of the time when I'm working on a project, my head is in the cloud, or I'm walking down the street, or I'm in a coffee shop. You don't really see me at a desk writing until it's massively crunch time.
So the interesting thing is your output could be incredibly short, right? You could do something that's very, very, a 30-second ad, something, as you say, on the side of a carton of juice. And so that's really interesting. So there's a total disconnect between, I guess, as with all creative things, disconnect between the effort that goes in and the output that people see.
Oh, well, this is the thing with the book. I mean, people, I don't know, looking at it, how long you'd think it took me to do, because, a lot of the pages are just like these snappy one-liners. It was 3 years in the making. And you'll find that the shorter the strap line, the shorter the tagline, the longer it's taken to arrive there. It's really hard. Hours and hours of thinking and writing, condensing that down to a 5-word sentence. It's really difficult. You just, if you think of just do it, or finger looking good, or just loving it, they're all 3 lines. I mean, how many people did it take to arrive at that point? Probably a large team of people and a lot of thinking.
Right. And I think that's always fascinating, because I guess the ones that are really powerful, as you say, the ones that we can remember, the whole point of it is to be effortlessly wheedle your way into my brain so it's working.
Mm.
So in many respects, the better you are at it, the less I'm going to notice it.
Yes. The easier it looks, the simpler it looks, the longer it's taken, I reckon.
And okay, so I mean, you clearly love what you did, right? Because it seems to show your personality. And so you have written a book called How to Make Work Not Suck.
Catchy, right?
And I find that fascinating, because you're clearly someone that doesn't think your job sucks, because you're clearly good at it. So how do we get from something that seems to fit you and your personality based on what I've seen, to writing a book about how bad the thing that you seem to be well connected to is?
Wow. That is a load.
That was the longest sentence ever, right? That was totally uncopywriterish, but you get the point.
That is a loaded question. I suppose I've had a lot of jobs in a lot of different industries, in a lot of different roles. In my 3rd year of uni, studying advertising, I had something like 6 or 7 internships. And that's actually when the idea for the book was born. So we're talking 11 years ago. And so I've had a lot of jobs and roles I've absolutely despised. And I sort of mentioned it in the introduction to the book. Having all of those varied experiences has given me sort of the opportunity to be a real fly on the wall. And so it's not that I'm saying this is how to love your job because, I love mine. It's just me noticing things over the years that I think it would be very helpful for people just starting out in their career to read, because, it took me a decade to get to this point. So you might as well read it a decade in advance and get your foot in the door kind of thing.
So this is the book that you wish the younger you had had.
Yes.
And you're targeting it at people starting out. Because I thought it was interesting, because I am clearly not just starting out on my career. But I read it and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And we'll come on to talk about some of the things that are in there. But that's your target audience. So this is people coming out of university. You're about to embark on something that actually, if you get it wrong, is going to be hideous, because it takes up huge amounts of your time. So don't do that. Follow this advice.
Pretty much, yeah. I think the target audience is sort of 18 to 24-year-olds, the age I was when I had just left secondary school. However, I don't think it stops being relevant no matter what age you are. I mean, the 40-year-old plus on LinkedIn are like loving it. I don't want to put myself in a corner or anything. Everyone and anyone should read it.
Right. But what I think is interesting is that you've kind of distilled down some basics and some universalities, if you like, that if you've done a job, and even actually if you do a job that you love, there are still elements of it that are crappy and unpleasant and whatever else. And so I guess more experience at work, i.e. longer time on this planet in sort of employment situations equals you're just going to see more of it.
Yes, totally. I mean, the book is full of insights. For example, as you were just sort of mentioning that, I just thought, yeah, I mean, it's true that there's always someone's birthday in an office. What if I don't want to sign your card? What if I don't want to put £5 towards your bottle of gin because I don't like you? There's loads of people in loads of offices who just like aren't particularly nice, or they don't make an effort with you. Why are we faking it? We don't have to be best friends just because we work under the same roof. Like, happy birthday, have a lovely day, but no, you can't have my money. I'm just being really truthful about it. So it's these little things that I've sort of, I guess, picked up on in my like 40 plus jobs that I've probably had since I was 19. And yeah, the book came along by, say, about 10 years ago. I just started writing notes of these sorts of things in my iPhone. And it's just followed me through every iPhone and sort of ended up being something like 500 points. The book, How to Make Work Not Suck, is a third of the size that it was. It was a huge book. We ran out of ink.
So you pushed the extremity of the notes function on your iPhone. So you've just been observing. And what's the thought process? Is it, I mean, it can be all of these things, but is it sort of, oh my God, that was a horrible thing? Or like, why the hell do we do it this way? What's the sort of creator? What makes it into the Notes app?
So everything makes it into the Notes app, especially 4 a.m. thoughts lying in bed. They definitely make it into the Notes app. There's no sort of criteria, really. Sometimes, I'll just be observing in an office and someone will do something funny and it will make me laugh. So I'll make a note. Or, a few jobs ago, I noticed that this company kept referring to themselves as a family. And it used to really bug me. And then I thought, that is an F word that like everyone should avoid. And it just used to really grate on me. And I used to work in this office and everyone was miserable. Everyone hated their jobs. And I used to think, we're all pretending we're a family. That's really gross. We're literally getting fired left, right, and center with absolutely no warning. That's going to make it into my book because people need to know that actually, if a company's calling themselves a family, for me, that's quite a red flag.
Right.
Just from past experience, I'm sure there are lots of companies out there that do practice what they preach. But from my experience, it's like a huge sort of, what's the expression? Like we're just putting a rug over the issue. That is not the expression.
But there's something interesting about that, right? Because what you're rightly exposing there is you're claiming to be one thing and you're using this vocabulary because you want the attributes that come with that word and the sense of belonging. There's a little, what you don't mean is we are a bunch of people that get together once a year at Christmas and squabble a lot, right? That's not the bit of family you're talking about. You're talking about we love each other and we're supportive and we're there regardless, all those sort of positive vibes.
Yeah.
And yet you're going, well, that's not the reality, is it? Right. So you're using that terminology to sort of try and it's misselling or it's misleading. It's the kind of thing where and so I'm fascinated because there's a little bit of a sort of advertising piece here where you're going, job not as advertised. Because if you were like a family, one, you wouldn't have to say it because we'd work it out for ourselves. Thank you. And number two, you'd actually be living these values, whereas clearly you're not because you're firing loads of people.
Totally. And everyone's crying in the loo at lunchtime and everyone's bitching behind everyone's back and everyone's throwing up their lunch out of utter fear and nerves to like quit. So yeah, that's my issue is the companies that hide behind that and try and sort of fake it. That's what I'm calling out. Not the one. I'm sure there's plenty that are practicing what they preach. But so it was sort of experiences like that, always being told as an intern, stop making people coffee. It makes you look weak. And I used to think, actually, the fact that every morning I go around to every desk as a 19-year-old and say, can I get you a tea or coffee? My name's Carina. I'm here for 2 weeks. I come from this university. I've got a dog and my favorite color is orange. Tell me a bit about you. It was a really good excuse to get noticed, make sure people knew I was there, that I was ready to help, that I was willing to help, that I was eager. that I have personality and I'm not just going to be hiding away in the corner. So that made it into the book because I think it's very important. You can't tell 18, 19-year-olds, don't go making people the hot drinks, or make you look weak. No, use it as an opportunity to introduce yourself and remember their order and be the best coffee maker on the planet.
Have you ever heard about the tea paradox?
No.
So this is an interesting one. So I was once told this, and I think the angle of the person telling you that's clearly somebody that's in a company where they've been trapped into this requirement to make drinks for everybody. And I better warn other people, but as you say, right, it all depends. If you're still doing that at age 60 in the company and your job is not to make tea or coffee, then maybe you've done something wrong, right? But the strategy that might work for somebody who's 20 years in isn't necessarily the one. But the tea paradox is a really interesting one, which is basically I was told that if you're ever asked to make tea, make mediocre tea. And here's the logic behind that, right? Because if you're really good at making tea, make stellar tea, you will become the person who makes tea. If you make really crap tea, you're the person who can't even make a cup of tea. So the trick I was told was straddle this thing by making tea that is acceptable, right? So you're not useless, but you're not stellar in that particular task, and therefore they will find other things for you to do. And so I thought that was an interesting counterweight to that.
That's genius. And actually, you're making me think of a guy that I used to work with a few offices ago who made like the best coffee in the world that I actually don't think I ever made my own coffee for the last sort of year on the job. So there is a fine line.
Right. So that example, you've overturned here's something I've been told. You're like, well, again, back to there's a sense here of, I'm going to call out the reality of things and just go, actually, that was terrible advice.
Yeah.
And so here's what I have observed in my experiences. And therefore there might be a different answer for you.
Definitely. The same as, when people say, listen to your elders, and the page in the book that basically says, yeah, listen to them, and then completely ignore their advice because advice is bias and their advice comes from their own experience. It's personal to them. It was at a different time. The circumstances were different. Why should you take on board someone else's advice?
That for me is really interesting because it strikes me really simple example. If you have grown up working in a physical environment, right? So nothing online, the internet didn't exist. You barely had a sort of computer. Maybe there's one computer in the office. Then your understanding of the digital environment is going to be different. You're in effect a digital immigrant, whereas digital natives who've grown up with it will have a different perspective on it. Mm. And so I find it fascinating when we see all these debates about we need everybody to come back to the office because that's what I did. And I look at it, there is some value to being in the office, no two ways, but I don't like fundamentalists at either end. I will never go to the office, but it seems to be a bad idea if there is an office to go to. But equally, you must always be in the office because I don't know what you're doing. That's also fundamentalist. And so I think that's what you've illustrated. There's a really good example is that experience doesn't necessarily equate to wisdom where that experience, but even if you're well-intentioned and you're giving advice that is genuinely in the other person's interest, you're not trying to punt some sort of agenda intentionally, that your experience might not be valid for the modern world. And so I think one of the things that, as I was reading through your book and sort of thinking about it, this is where I went, was to say, not only do I recognize some of these things, but I think what you're doing is pointing out where orthodoxy and wisdom might not necessarily apply. And I feel that various things that have happened in recent years, social trends and technology, is pointing us in the direction where past experience might not even just not be valuable, might be massively counterproductive because it doesn't work in this new era. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I think the world has changed so much from when I was an intern. I don't even know if they work the same way anymore. So yeah, it's different for everyone, isn't it? I mean, also the book was written now 3 years ago.
Oh God. I mean, three COVID years.
Yeah.
So that's weird. That's wishing. That's the same. But yeah, we were almost up to the 3 year mark, I guess, from when it started. And you'd sort of sit there and that's worth a decade or maybe more, right?
Honestly, that was my biggest fear when the book came out was, oh God, is it going to be really outdated? I mean, I had jokes in there about Instagram and Snapchat that we changed last minute to TikTok. How am I going to get down with the kids? Right. I'm still young, but wow, things date so quickly.
And because on the one hand, right, you're talking about universal truths, and you go, but better make sure this is up to date, right? And so, talk a little bit about the presentation, because how did you design this? Because it's really, as is obvious from the way that you speak and given what you do, you clearly wanted to make it visually appealing. But you've kind of got a combination of quotes. You've got some lovely artwork in there. What was the thinking behind that?
We kind of just wanted it to feel like a coloring in book for adults, basically. For me, I'd always said the cover of the book is so important. People say don't judge a book by its cover. I absolutely judge a book by its cover. I mean,
it's appalling advice, right? Because I sit there and go, everybody knows that the cover is something you generally can't open a book without having looked at the cover. I mean, you can, obviously you can practically, but generally speaking, we don't do that, right? And so, of course, we're going to judge a book, but it was stupid advice.
Totally. I mean, the amount of best-selling novels that I've missed out on because I can't bear the look of the cover. I mean, that's so terrible to say. So, yeah, anyway, I always said to the publishers, I want this to be a really lovely book on a shelf. I want it to look lovely on my living room shelf, and I want people to gift it, and I want it to make a lovely gift for people. But in terms of the actual design itself, the illustrations are done by Simon Landrian. He's an illustrator from Paris. And the rest is the design team at Lawrence King Publishing. I had the ideas for the illustrations on every page. So, I mean, I'm looking at the book now. Hold on to your receipts. I said, let's make it look like a receipt. Can we have all the quotes in speech bubbles? Can every contributor have their own color? There shouldn't be illustrations on the contributors' quote pages because they need to look like separate standalone pages. Just say thanks. Can we have the word thanks inside a smile? So when I sent off the manuscript, the way we did it was every page of copy, I'd have a footnote at the end of the page with my idea for the illustration. And they went with every single illustration. And that was left in the hands of Simon and our amazing art director. Colors wasn't down to me. I had a say.
Right.
I think the first sort of range of colors, I said, oh, can we turn it down a bit? They're a little bit too like neon. So we toned it down a bit. As for like bright face stuff, actually, fun fact. Well, it's not that fun, to be honest. You know, the color of the spine, the sort of like yellow.
Yes.
The entire cover was that yellow. The entire cover, like a week before going to print. And it was a bit too yellow for me. So I spoke to them and I said, look, is there any way we can make it an off-white and do the spine in that yellow? Changed it. And then, so it was a really collaborative product. I cannot take credit for how it looks totally, but I definitely had a say, like, this guy playing with the clock and the fact that, so originally on the cover, this guy hiding underneath the desk, it was a desk that just had a phone on it. And I said, we've got to put a baguette on the desk. Like there's got to be a sandwich on the desk.
Right.
Plant, everyone talks about having desk plant. So yeah, it was a collaborative project, but I'm so happy with how it looks. That was my biggest fear. But having said that, Lawrence King make stunning books. I own a lot of Lawrence King books. And my biggest dream was that it would look nice on a bookshelf. And I think we've succeeded.
No, you absolutely have. So it's a combination of sort of what I'll call observations.
Yeah.
And quotes from people that have inspired you. And we'll reference a couple of them because the one in particular that I talked to you about before recording that has really blown my mind. And I no exaggeration, it changed many an interaction I've had with people. So we'll talk about that. But so you've got these different bits, which is sort of you just making statements, observing things, little tips. How do you think about those and the balance of those in the book? Or did it just sort of flow together with, that's great, so I'll pull that in? Is there a sort of structure to that sense?
Again, that's a lot down to the editor. I had an amazing editor because, like I said, the book is, 160 something pages. I think originally, no joke, it was about 400 pages. We had a lot more quotes from contributors. Every interview with each contributor lasted between 2 to 3 hours.
Okay, so you've actually gone out and interviewed people and grabbed the quotes from that, as opposed to, this is something someone said to me in the office that I remembered that was particularly powerful.
Oh no, they were all done on Zoom. I interviewed all of the contributors, bar a few who did it like via email instead. But they were really long interviews, and we had to cut them down massively. I mean, they would have taken up 10 pages each in the book. Yeah, it was originally a very long book. It was I'd say much more verging on self-help with a hint of humor and sarcasm. And I feel the self-help's a bit gone out the window and we've been left with the honest sarcasm. But as for deciding, I mean, it was just the memorable bits that it's a bit, it was difficult. It was the memorable stuff I wanted to keep, the bits that I thought my 18-year-old self needs to know this, a bit with taking the piss out of the fact that everyone uses Helvetica in the art world. So we've got to leave that in because it's a funny little insight. What would make a good illustration? Choosing the quotes, condensing the quotes from the contributors was really hard. Obviously, you being the reader, you take them as they are, not knowing what didn't make the final cut. But me knowing what didn't make the final cut makes me really sad. So I've considered releasing the Zoom sort of interviews as podcasts, or I've considered at least putting the full interviews on my website. I just haven't got around to it. But yeah, they were a lot longer.
And the one, and I'm going to talk about the one that really, really got to me was a very simple piece of advice. Well, it's a bit more than very simple, but it just starts with when someone asks you how you are, just say fucking great.
I'm fucking great, thanks. Yeah.
And I read that and I was like, it's funny, right? Because it's inappropriate and slightly naughty.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's brilliant because particularly if you're having a meeting in the UK, and many listeners to the show abroad may not realize this, but in the UK, the question, how are you, is not a genuine question. Right? It's not, really, we have absolutely no interest whatsoever in knowing that, but it's just a way of filling a little bit of time and to have this sort of basic, we go, yeah, fine, thanks, how are you?
Yeah.
It's generally the way one is expected to respond to that. And if something exceptional has happened to you, then you are allowed to mention it. But generally speaking, it's got to be pretty out there for you to even go there. So this idea that you would just use that chuck in a swear word and then sort of be really, really positive is quite shocking and eye-catching. And I thought about it, the reason I loved it was I just went, past G's, because it's so unexpected. It's so positive, yes, can do attitude. And you can't but smile when you're saying it. So I've started to use it and it's genuinely been game changing because I've just sort of found myself, I am actually in a better mood as a result of doing it. And therefore, even if I wasn't in a great mood before, you can't out. So it forces you into the space. And I just thought, what a brilliant, lovely little hack that stands out and makes the conversation and makes a ludicrous intro point, a sort of pathetic interaction between two human beings that serves no purpose, into something that's really positive and life-affirming.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried and tested it myself, and I agree with you. It's a brilliant, very simple, very obvious, I suppose, piece of advice. But yeah, it's psychological, isn't it? It sort of convinces you that actually you're in a great mood and everything's going absolutely fantastic. That was actually said to me by Adam Day-Lewin. I used to work with him. I used to do voiceovers for him. He's the ex-creative director of Condé Nast. And he's ended up being such a good friend throughout the years. He is full of the best advice. He's actually sort of a bit of a career mentor for me. He calls himself a serial bullshitter. I mean, he's the guy that in the book, he says he openly has lied on his CV. He gets himself into the craziest of situations through serial blagging and then actually ends up becoming what he has blagged. It's just, he's amazing. You can chuck him into any situation and he'll absolutely swim, never sink. He's not a sinker.
And it's like, and I will say later, Dana, because like I got in touch with LinkedIn having read it. And as I've said to Carina before we started recording, I didn't realize that when you send messages to people on LinkedIn that you're not connected to, you're not allowed to send attachments. So I told him how brilliant this thing that he'd done was without telling him what the thing was. Fortunately, he was kind enough to connect and I've now managed to inform him. But I was left hanging for about a week where I wondered whether he understood what it was I thought was brilliant about it. But you're right. I mean, really, really inspirational individual. And the people that you've picked, to the extent I know them or of them, again, you've chosen people that I think have a really interesting outlook on life. Which is slightly sort of quirky, counterintuitive thinkers that bring a different perspective. That's one of the reasons I love the book. Is it was it's not conventional wisdom about brush your teeth before you go to bed and that sort of an apple a day keeps the doctor away type stuff. Important as that is, it's people with a slightly quirky, slightly cheeky approach to life.
Yeah. some of them I knew already. Half I knew already. I've worked with them before, or they're friends of friends. The other half are people I just really wanted an excuse to talk to. And
That's why I have a podcast. It's exactly the same thing.
Anything to sort of talk to them. They're people that I knew would have something interesting and, slightly left field to say. And they all absolutely nailed it. I'm really happy with the different sort of scope of people in the book. It was great.
And the thing I thought was interesting was that if you were writing the sensible careers handbook, the kind of thing that you'd sort of get given, this is telling you about life.
Yeah.
Wouldn't take quotes from these people, right? It would all be about, says the man who I will fully confess went off to become an accountant, right? Because that was sensible. Well, would be full of that sort of advice. Go and do something sensible and, do this and get to qualification and blah, 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 blah. All of the people you quoted, right, would not be giving that kind of advice. So it is the sort of counterintuitive is the wrong word, because I think when you read what they say, it's actually incredibly intuitive. So it's not counterintuitive, but it's more sort of contrarian, possibly, to conventional wisdom. And it's kind of suggesting things that you wouldn't get from your traditional guide, which I guess is the whole point of what you've done in the book. It's pulling out the stuff that you can't find else.
Totally. I didn't want this book to become one of those other books and just, to go missing in the self-help section at Waterstones. That's why the cover was so important. I want it to be intriguing enough that people pick it up. But everyone I interviewed, actually, they were just lovely conversations. I'd say about 80% of the chats were just about life. I mean, Claire Smith at Core, best British chef in the UK. I was asking her, like, how do you like your eggs in the morning? Like, do you ever cry in the kitchen? Like, how does it feel bossing people around? And we were just talking about life, like, how do you sleep at night and how do you make the best beef Wellington? Sort of towards the end of the conversation, tell me a bit about this, tell me a bit about that. And it was just like, they weren't interviews. They were just really lovely conversations with people I genuinely just wanted to spend time with on the phone. And I'm very pleased that they came across that way.
Throughout the whole thing, and the title says it all, right? There was this real sense of fun.
It wasn't water. It went through, this is the third title.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was originally called The Art of Creative Bullshitting. Then it became Everybody's Faking It. But it's hard to explain. Actually, it's the page, where is my own book? Bear with. The page that says everyone's a game-changing, amplifying pioneer, and it's all stuff and it says faking it.
Yeah.
That's the cover of the book. So it was actually called Everyone's Faking It. And then sort of towards the end, we were all just having a meeting. We were like, we're not saying everyone's faking it. Why are we calling the book Everyone's Faking It? No one can
That's completely misleading. Right?
I'm not saying everyone's faking it. How did we even end up here? And that's when it became How to Make Work Not Suck, which is such a mouthful to say. And The Art of Creative Bullshitting is actually a very, very similar story. It was when I originally pitched the book like 3 years ago, and it was more about everyone's creative. Like, stop saying you're uncreative. Everyone's got the potential to be creative. So you've got to bullshit your way there, and then you'll just become this creative that you want to be. And so that was also a title that, halfway through developing the book, we were like, that doesn't work anymore. I'm not saying that we're all bullshitting. And yet it was so hard naming the book. Really, it took the whole, 3 years to name it, because it kept sort of just evolving into this different thing. Yeah, and actually that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about copywriting. How to Make Work Not Suck. It's 5 words and it took 3 years.
Right. But at least some of the iterations go in the book, right? So it's not all sort of left on the, whatever the equivalent of the copy room floor, I guess would be the word to describe.
It was like how I imagine it is naming a child.
Right.
Some amount of pressure.
Right. Except in those situations, you probably shouldn't reveal to the cat, hey, we're going to call you this, right? Because there's a reaction that may come from that you might not want to unleash. So at least this one you can talk about.
Yeah.
With that in mind, where does it sit on the sort of bookstore shelf? Where libraries put it? Because when you talked about that, I was like, well, I get why you went through those sort of titles, because that's not it's not out of kilter with the sort of area that you're playing with. But on the other hand, I think what you've landed on is much better. How does it get categorized?
So I have no idea. On Amazon, it's in business humor and work and interviews. And then it's in like most gifted, most wished for kind of stuff. But I went into a bookshop yesterday, one of my favorite bookstores.
Oh, you tweeted about this. I saw this. You did.
And it's next to Alan Bennett. It's next to Alan Bennett and that really lovely The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse book. So I don't know why, but the other two have great covers. So are we just being grouped together based on cover appeal? Am I the cover girl?
But I'll tell you what, that's not a bad place to be, right? Because back to your point around, I don't want to sit in the self-help section of water stands. I could sort of see somebody going, well, yeah, there are a multitude of ways of classifying this, and therefore you could end up in some awful places.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know. For me, if I want it to sort of be as you enter a bookstore with all the other lovely covers in the new non-fiction section. That's like the goal for me.
Right. Well, because it's definitely not fiction, right? It's absolutely the reality.
It's real. It's real talk. This is the realist talk. This is zero bullshit, real talk.
Talk me that. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the reactions that you've had and this audience in which I would include myself, sort of not the core audience, but nonetheless we've taken to it.
Mm.
What's the sort of, let's start with the actual intended audience. How's it gone across with them?
I mean, great. People are finding it very funny. I mean, in every sort of review that I've read, people say the same thing, like, don't be fooled. It's really funny, but it's full of really good gems of advice. I follow what everyone's saying about it on LinkedIn, and it's just a lot of people saying things like, oh, I'd forgotten about that, or, oh my God, this is so true. Or, you know, I put up the page about respect your sandwich, 10 minutes in front of the computer isn't lunch. I put that on LinkedIn last week, and it went like mini viral, very mini viral. But, you know, it was a lot of people who were reading it as they were eating their sandwich at their desk in their office. So I guess the irony of it all is what's getting people talking.
But that's an interesting framing of the book, right? Because I hadn't thought about it in that way. I'd seen you doing it on social media, but you're right. Like each page, it's very, I mean, we can question whether Instagram is the right word, but Instagrammable, for want of a better phrase, right? You've got this very good, vivid imagery, easy to digest. It's simple. It doesn't, you know, it sort of doesn't require. I mean, the reading age is very low, and that's meant as a compliment, by the way, not as a sort of sprint for small children. But you've kind of taken something that's very powerful on social media and put it in book form. And I'm going to get hammered now when people going, books got there first. Social media is a new invention. But you get the point, right? It works. It works sort of. It's quite a nice thing of taking something that we recognize from that medium and putting it in a nice book format.
At the moment, I'm pretty much rinsing pages from the book. The pretty pages, or my favorite pages, I try and post about, 2 to 3 times a week. I just don't want to piss people off. That's a massive feeling I'm experiencing at the moment as well, is this like sense that, oh God, like I'm probably really annoying people at this point. Like they get it. You've got a book out, like it needs to sell, but it's that, but also like, I'm really proud of it. And I feel, unless you force it down some people's throats, maybe they're not going to think to buy it or flick through it. So I'm just forcing it upon people.
I get that completely, because I think it's really difficult when you're there. And there's some interesting psychology around that, which is you see every single post that goes out. And I always used to think of it, and I do this when I sort of promote my own business, where you sort of go, I will do a promotional post today. And then you think, oh my God, somebody may have seen this before. And I feel a bit like the person who's got a shop on the high street. And what I'm doing is rushing out and shouting at everybody and handing them out something as they walk past. I will hand you a flyer, or I've taken every billboard in town and I'm going to really start pissing these people off. But of course, the high street, the digital high street doesn't work in that way. So they may not even have seen it. And I think what's really interesting about the thing is that you're not kind of, yes, it's buy my book, but it's done as, let me show you what's in it. And by the way, the reason I want you to read this is because what's in it is really interesting, funny, good, useful, relatable. And so I wouldn't worry about that at all. I'd go the opposite way of sort of going, but you've got 160 or whatever it is ads for your book that you can run that are ready to rock and roll because they're in the right format.
Totally.
And I think if somebody doesn't like it, it's that classic thing, right? If they don't like it, they don't like it, right? Nobody's forcing you to have your social media feed thrust on them.
No, totally. I mean, in recent days, I've had a massive sort of fuck it moment. I mean, I'm really proud of it. It's taken ages to do. I want you to read it. And if you're not going to go out and buy it, or if you don't have the intrigue to want to flick through it yourself, then here you go. I'll do it for you. If you like it enough, then you're going to be intrigued enough to want to buy it. So it seems to be working out really well for me, that tactic. I think, a lot of people are buying it based on me sharing the odd page here or there.
But just unpick that fuck it moment, because I would have thought that somebody that has written this kind of book would, and does what you do, and I'm going to layer on a whole load of other prejudices around this, right? Would sort of naturally be gregarious, outgoing, and want people to see what you've done, which I think the substance of what you're saying absolutely is, right? You're proud of the book, but I'm really intrigued by that, because I wouldn't have expected you to say that.
Yeah, it's weird. But then again, it's the same as, when I was a presenter, you would think also that I was like incredibly confident, very comfortable in my own skin. It's totally the opposite. And also, it feels like the book is something I'm very protective of, and I'm very aware of people thinking things like, make moves in silence, and, don't let people know about your achievements because it looks like bragging or it looks like boasting. Be humble. And it's like, I've tried that, and actually that gets you absolutely nowhere. And if you've got something important to say and you're proud about what you're doing, people should know, or they're never going to find it. I mean, it's really similar to, having a baby and then being that parent that posts about their newborn nonstop. I'm doing the same thing because I'm proud and I want people to know it exists. And the people that unfollow me because of it, there hasn't been anyone, but I'm sure I'm muted on a lot of people's Instagrams and LinkedIn. They just don't want to know. I made my peace. You're aware of it. Job on. Have a lovely day. I'm sure you would do the same if you were in my shoes. It's just called being proud of the project, So,
But I think that there's a difference to my mind between the kind of the adult equivalent of I've just got my stage 4 gymnastics badge, right? So you get people putting absolute crap on there, thrilled and honoured to be blah, 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 blah. And you go, it's just another cruddy award ceremony that frankly your company's probably sponsored, but no, not impressive achievements that people wang on about. And then and to those I find deeply irritating. But yours, I'm like, you've taken time to write a book, right? Right, that has been published by a professional. This isn't them self-published, not a criticism of people self-publishing, because I may end up there myself one day. But this is something that is worth being proud of. So for me, there's no comparison between the two things. I look at it again. There's one that's got some intelligent thought. The other one, the one that cracks me up is, did you know that Snapchat does qualifications? Right.
No.
I found out this is like a Snapchat. This is so that somebody had put on their LinkedIn thing that they had a qualification from Snapchat. Was Snap, to be clear, I think, right? And I sort of look at that's like I've done a basic Excel course, right? Lovely, right? Great, right? And we all have to start somewhere. But I'm not suggesting that that's going to be a lifetime achievement. I would argue a book being published is, and especially when it's taking you this long and they put it this much long, is probably worthy of that publicity.
Well, thank you. And that is what I mean by having recently heard the fuck it revelation, which is that voice, that inner monologue is starting to come through because, I'm proud of it and I want people to know it exists. And I'm, if you're a bit sick of it, go ahead and mute me. But also, there are people that are only just discovering the book now. It only came out 2-3 weeks ago. So, it's a big part of it is pissing people off. We're doing the rounds for probably the next year, to be honest.
Right. Well, you've got 150, right? So you do one every 2 days. That gives you a year's worth of posts already done.
Perfect. Thanks. I'm about that.
Right. Yeah, there we go. And you can recycle as well. So maybe that's 2 years worth. Who knows? I'm intrigued. So as you talk about yourself and the sort of the fuck it moment, when you were experiencing these things, did you say things at the time, or was this like sort of sequent thoughts you took away? Because it seemed to me that when I read it, to your point, I found myself chuckling. Gosh, the birthday card one that you raised it, right, was this pressure to put money in for someone that you absolutely hate, which under any other circumstances, you would go, no, I'm not. Like if somebody goes, would you want to chip in for this? No, I do not. Right. But because it's in a work context and there's a list that goes around and you have to tick your name off to say when you've done something. And you always feel like somebody's going to be looking and counting the money. So not only is there pressure to give, but there's a psychological, is it a note or is it just coins and sort of, and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
When you point it out in the way that you do, I go, that is weird. Well, why do we think that's acceptable? And there's tons of often, and it led me into a sort of rabbit hole of, hold on a minute, that's unacceptable. There's a load of other things that are going on that are not, they're not the same thing, but there are identical amounts of pressure that exist because of this weird context. Were you calling this stuff out? Or is this just stuff you've taken? And at the end of the day, you're going, this is just a bit weird, but I can't say anything to anyone. And it's not a criticism. I'm always saying, expecting you not to say that because I think we all accept it. But I wondered how you've gone through processing because you've clearly been more observant than the average person.
Interesting question. I'm definitely outspoken, and anyone that knows me knows I'm outspoken, but nice. I definitely say what I feel, and it's not always correct, but I'm someone that always needs to sort of voice things and, get things off my chest. When it comes to things like, would I contribute money to someone I don't like's birthday in the office, that is when I would just take my lunch break or hide in the loo because I cannot bear confrontation. So no, I wouldn't have gone, no, I don't like so-and-so, I'm not paying. I just would have silently sort of left the building.
Right.
So I'm a bit of both, really. I mean, presentations, I used to say, no, not doing it, hate them. And they used to say, well, you have to. And I'd say, no, you don't understand. I'll have sleepless nights leading up to it. My hands go clammy. I won't do a good job. Believe me, you really can't force me to do this presentation. Or, small talk, networking. I hate networking. So I just wouldn't go. I'd instead, email the person, say I wasn't at that event tonight, but I'd still love to talk to you. Can you go outside of that environment, please? I'll find a way, basically. I hate being in situations that I'm uncomfortable in. But very openly, in jobs in the past, I used to say to people, God, isn't it ironic that the people in HR are always the worst people? Or,
right.
If I had a terrible boss.
We love you HR professionals listening to the show because you're not the ones we're talking about, but yeah.
No, but I've just had really bad experiences in the past. So a bit of both, really. I can be quite outspoken, but I never sort of step over the line. I'm never fake, If someone's being a horrible boss and they're making everyone's life a misery, I'd like to think I'd let them know.
Logically, by leaving the job.
By leaving the job or saying, unless you're nicer, I'm going to leave in a few months' time. Are you aware that you're making people really miserable? I can't sit there in silence. At the end of the day, it's just a job. It's not worth your sanity.
And it's interesting that you've used the word work in the title. And I don't want to get overly analytical about one word, but you are somebody that understands the importance of language. So we can analyze to a certain extent. And you've talked because there is this movement to sort of think about work and fulfillment and sort of finding your dream career and can you get the perfect job that you absolutely love, all those sorts of things. And that generally, the word work has negative connotations. And so to a certain extent, it's for the framing of the book, it is almost that because you're talking about a weird world where strange things happen that we know, when we're required to conform in odd ways for reasons that don't always make sense. And so there is this sense of looking in at it and going, this is a strange beast, a strange thing, which is why the word work would be better than vocation or something like that. Because if vocation would imply, it was what you were here to do, and therefore these dynamics that you talk about wouldn't exist.
I didn't overanalyze the title that much. I mean, it took ages to get there, but when we all arrived.
Doesn't mean I've done any work on it, right?
I mean, it just
pun intended. Right.
It just sounded cool and catchy. I mean, honest advice for people with jobs. I mean, it's really vague. So yeah, it wasn't that deep. It sounded better than everyone's faking it, which, I didn't really mean.
Right.
And we were over having, the word bullshit in the title. That also just didn't sit right. So yeah, work. I don't know. I haven't actually thought about it that much.
Because I did, again, and wary of overanalyzing it, but I do think there's something interesting here about you are calling out weirdness, right? Because if work felt normal, you wouldn't need guides to it and you wouldn't have some of these dynamics occurring. It's because you've stepped into a world and you've been prepared to go, this is a bit weird, right? I mean, the birthday card being a good example, but there are lots of other constructs and things we're required to do in that environment that don't necessarily feel natural. And of course, there are always going to be things that they're sensible around that. You know, there are things that I probably shouldn't be allowed to do in the office that I'm allowed to do at home because it's a different environment. And I don't have hundreds of other people around. Yeah. And therefore I don't have to think in that same social way. But there is something about traditional work patterns and the way we do things. And COVID is sort of starting to examine some of those with the patterns that we're seeing. But I mean, what you're really pointing out, it seems to me, is that work is a bit weird.
Yeah.
And there's some weird shit that goes on in that context that doesn't seem to necessarily flow with the rest of existence.
Totally. And also I urge you to not delve too deeply into the title or even some of my advice in the book. I mean, I was speaking to the publishers before I wrote the introduction to it, and they were like, do you think maybe you should mention that you contradict yourself on like every other page? And I was like, you know what? If people pick up on that, they pick up on that. But I contradict myself throughout, constantly listen to people's advice. Don't listen to people's advice. Follow your heart. Don't follow your heart. Believe in your purpose. You won't ever have a purpose. You know, so make tea, don't make tea. Right. Don't take it too seriously.
But no, I agree. And to be honest, that's part of the joy of it, right? You sort of go, I mean, there's some things in there. I mean, if people treat this like a checklist, they're in all sorts of trouble because as you say, it's like, what is she doing? Yeah. That's very strange. And of course, there are things to which there is no right answer. Yeah. There isn't a perfect solution to some of the weirdities that go on. I've just made up a word, but anyway, where you just muddle on through. And so you're just observing. Yeah. And so this is stuff that goes on.
Totally. I mean, if you think of it now as these were all points that were in my notes folder on my iPhone, it will probably start to make a bit more sense. You know, a lot of them I was writing when I'd just woken up, or it was the middle of the night, or I was walking down the street heading for a lamppost. You know, it's just my brain. And actually, there are pages from the book that used to be sitting on my website on a page that was called How to Spot a Creative. And it was all about the stereotypical things that creatives do, say, wear, buy. And that started to form parts of the book as well. So I was taking sort of inspiration from all areas. I think that's why naming the book was so hard, because it's so hard to encapsulate what it is. It's a bit of so much. You should have seen some of the other titles. I mean, they were weird, really. So ambiguous. You wouldn't have known what the hell the book was about. At least How to Make Work Not Suck gives it a sort of worky genre. Like, you know, it's something about office. You know, it's something about careers. Like, it was just the right amount of ambiguous. It's also, you know, honest advice for people with jobs. Not all of it is advice, is it?
Right.
So, honest advice and insights about, you know, being in an office and being an intern and not hating your life and never quitting. Yeah, it could have gone down so many routes.
It's interesting that because it's struck me that it's also a kind of, look, if you go like, and you're talking about the target audience makes a lot of sense, right? Which is you're about to enter a really weird environment that you have not encountered before.
Yeah.
Which is going to cause you all sorts of emotions.
Yeah.
And experiences and whatever. And so be ready for that, right? And so I think the contradictory advice is perfectly logical because actually you never quite know what's going to play out. And particularly if you're job hopping, for want of a better phrase, then you're going to see loads of weird things and loads of weird environments that frankly, you know, I find it really funny. The education system doesn't really prepare you for.
Totally. And
right. It's sort of like we teach you one thing and then now you join the real, unless you go become a teacher, at which point you never leave that.
Trapped for life. Yeah, it's very true. And, you know, you say job hopping. That was something, you know, really important that I wanted to hint at in the book is that, you know, why do we have to commit to this one career? And the word career itself, it literally implies this like linear path that you're bound to for life, that you have to marry and you can't divorce from. You know, why can't you be a pharmacist turned graphic designer? Like, who says you can't do that? Like, we change our haircuts, we change our image, we change our partners. Why can't we change what we do? And so, I spent years, applying for jobs, and the response to my CV used to be, your CV is really impressive. You've done some really cool things, but we don't get how it relates to this, or we don't know what benefit this role could bring you. And it's like, well, give me a chance and you can find out. If you're impressed by the other stuff I've done, maybe you'll be impressed once you give me a chance in this role, And I think now that's changing, and people are starting to see varied CVs and go, well, this is cool. She can do that and she can do this. And all these skills have led to this.
Right.
So yeah, that's one thing that I wanted, the 18-year-old to take away is people that say, oh, you're studying to be an accountant, you're bound to it for life. No, if you're bored of it in 5 years, go and be, a surfing instructor.
Yeah. And I think that there's something weird about, you've managed to decide early on, and I love it when you get somebody who goes, I always wanted to be a doctor or an airline pilot, and they've known from age 6, whatever. Mm. Then I kind of go, that's great for you, right? And if that's genuinely what works for you, amazing, right? I'm a little bit jealous because I've never, I didn't get that sense. So I just kind of meandered around trying various things to see what worked. But sort of the expectation that we should all do that, right? Why? I find it strange when you're asked to pick, even like university, right? Knowing what degree to study, if we make a presumption that is defining what you will do later on.
Yeah.
I think it's appalling. I think I'm not sure that I would have been qualifying age 30 to work out what I should have been studying, let alone as a kid where you've got a tremendous amount of pressure on you. And so I find this idea that we have to pre-select, and that the people who've done that are somebody who's praiseworthy to stick at what you're doing. I would disagree. If I go and watch a movie and it's crap, I will willingly walk out.
Oh.
Why would I sit there and spend the second? I've done it, theatre as well. There's something to be about that. We can't possibly walk out. If this is crap, I would switch my TV off at home if I were watching something awful. Why does that not apply to jobs or anything else?
Yeah, I totally agree. I was talking about this with someone the other day. The fact that we choose our A-levels at like 17 or whatever it is, or what degree what route you're going to go down is like so young. The decisions I would have made now, I totally made the wrong decision. And also, as for knowing what you want to do with your life, I still don't know. After everything I've dabbled in, I thought I wanted to be a TV presenter. And then, I experienced that. I started being a presenter, and then it didn't fulfill me. So I then had massive confusion. And then, I've explored all these different things. Maybe I'll just always be exploring these things. Like, what is the harm in that? And I suppose that's part of, being a creative person, is you can sort of see the potential in a lot of different avenues. Now I've written a book, I'll go back to work in an office in a few months' time. That's probably
just to get some stuff for the next one, right?
But yeah.
Just to revalidate the rest of the notebook. You just go, I will scratch that one through because they won't understand that joke anymore.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be someone that writes books for the rest of their life. It's just another thing that I can sort of say I've done. God knows what the future holds. But as for like discovering my purpose, or knowing what I'm doing with my life, not a clue. If anything, I've just confused my CV more.
Love it. Amazing. Time, as I knew it would, has absolutely flown by. And so let me say, firstly, thank you for writing the book, because it's joyous, and it literally, it's something I keep turning back to, and it keeps bringing back fresh memories. And as I say, just literally for that one life hack that I discovered as reading it, it's worth the price of the book alone, let alone all the other things and the joy I have of owning it. And it comes clearly highly recommended. Otherwise you wouldn't have been the show. So let me say thank you for that. Please keep going. If there's more books in you, get them out there because we want to read them. But secondly, thank you for being an amazing guest on the podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned something. It's just nice to speak to someone who's just got a really positive sense about the world, because there's so many reasons to be depressed. And so positive people make me very happy. And you've done that as well. So thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I feel like I've just chatted a load of crap, to be honest. Did I say anything remote?
One person's crap is another person's gold dust.
I hope I've said something even remotely useful or profound. But yeah, no, thank you so much. It's been so nice to talk to you. I can't wait to hear this back and cringe at the sound of my own voice.
Do not worry. I'll put links to your website, your book, and anything else that you want to share with the audience in the show notes. But Carina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's it for this episode of the Human Risk Podcast. My enormous thanks to Carina for appearing and to you for listening. To find out more about Carina, her work, and her book, How to Make Work Not Suck, have a look in the show notes. There are links to those there. If this is your first time listening to the Human Risk Podcast, welcome. You can subscribe wherever you get your quality audio content. It's available on all of the major podcasting platforms. To find out more about human risk and the work that I do with my clients and helping them to eliminate theirs, visit human-risk.com. I'll be back very soon with another episode of this show, but in the meantime, stay safe, make sure your work doesn't suck, and thanks for listening.